My name's Jocelyn Parker. I'm 30, a software engineer, and for the past 8 years, I've been the one holding my family up financially. I covered my dad's hospital bills, paid my sister's rent, and kept my mom's expenses afloat, believing that was what kept us together. But no matter how much I gave, my parents only poured affection and gifts onto my sister. For me, it was just constant requests, never gratitude. I accepted it, convincing myself that's what family meant. Then came one Sunday dinner at our house in Savannah, the night that shattered everything. Halfway through the meal, my parents locked eyes on me and said the words I'll never forget. "You're not part of this family." The sting of it felt like a slap. They twisted every sacrifice I'd made into something ugly, calling my help controlling, my support showing off. I tightened my grip on my glass, forced a small nod, and said only, "Understood." A few weeks later, their calls and texts started again, pleading for money. My response was simple. "I'm not part of the family, remember?" That was the day I reclaimed my life. How did I go from being their personal ATM to finally cutting the cord? Stick with me, and I'll tell you. And if you've ever felt drained by the very people you love, drop a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe. I want to share how I found my freedom. It all began back when I was a teenager in Savannah. My sister, Dana Parker, 3 years older, was always the golden child in my parents' eyes. Nancy and Edward Parker adored her. I was the one left in the shadows, constantly compared to Dana's charm and falling short in their eyes. Their favoritism wasn't hidden. It was blatant. Mom would slip Dana cash for trendy clothes, dresses, jackets, whatever she wanted. Dad handed her a shiny new phone for her 18th birthday, while I was left with a cracked second-hand one. Dana's birthdays were full-blown celebrations with balloons, gift cards, even a used car when she turned 20. Mine? Sometimes just a card, sometimes nothing. "You're the responsible one, Jocelyn." Mom would shrug whenever I looked disappointed. Dana basked in it, tossing her hair, bragging about how much they adored her. I swallowed the hurt, stayed quiet, and buried myself in schoolwork instead. Late nights with textbooks became my escape. All that effort paid off when I earned a full scholarship to Georgia Tech. Dana barely noticed, too busy showing off her latest gifts. My parents didn't even attend my high school graduation. Apparently, Dana's job applications were more important. Standing alone on that stage with my diploma, I promised myself I'd rise above their neglect. By 22, I had my software engineering degree and a stable job back in Savannah. The paycheck was good, but my family's needs drained it fast. My dad's heart condition meant endless hospital bills, which I paid. I sent money each month to help Mom with groceries and utilities. When Dana couldn't cover her rent from her boutique job, I took that on too. I told myself that's just what families do, even as it left me exhausted. The favoritism never faded. Mom called Dana our pride, gushing over the smallest things, like buying one bag of groceries. Dad slipped Dana cash for extras, which she blew on shoes or nights out. I got no recognition, just more demands. One Christmas, Dana unwrapped a sparkling necklace, while my gift was a plain mug. I smiled through the ache in my chest. Dana loved to rub it in, calling me to brag about Dad's generosity or Mom's praise. "They know I'm special," she'd laugh. I'd hang up, staring at my laptop, wondering why all my efforts meant nothing. The comparisons cut deepest. "Why can't you be more like Dana?" Mom would snap whenever I hesitated to send more money. Dad stayed silent, which somehow hurt more than if he'd spoken. I started keeping track of what I was giving, not out of bitterness, but just to remind myself I was contributing. 8 years of sacrifice, and still, I wasn't their daughter. I was just their safety net. By my late 20s, I was running on fumes. My best friend, Kristen Shaw, saw it clearly. "They're using you," she'd say over coffee. I'd nod, but deep down, I wasn't ready to face it. I kept working late nights, coding until my eyes burned, convincing myself I could somehow repair what was broken. I couldn't see the truth yet. I was wrong. Then last fall, I decided to host a Sunday dinner at my place. My goal was to close the gap, to create one night where we could feel like a real family again. I poured weeks of planning into it, determined to make everything perfect. I spent hours in the kitchen preparing roast beef, mashed potatoes, and homemade apple pie. Nearly $200 went into food and decorations. I set the dining room table in our Savannah house, laying out candles and a spotless white cloth, hoping the atmosphere might soften years of distance. My best friend, Kristen Shaw, came early to lend a hand. She chopped vegetables and stirred the gravy, her laughter spilling warmly through the kitchen. But as we worked, she caught the clipped way my mom spoke when I called to confirm the dinner time. "Something's off with Nancy," Kristen whispered, brow furrowed. I brushed it aside, blaming it on Mom's usual stress, though a knot twisted in my stomach. I wanted tonight to succeed, to prove I could bring us together again. When everyone finally arrived, the mood started light. My sister Dana dropped her purse on the couch, inhaled, and praised the smell of the food. Dad gave me a small approving nod as he sat, and even Mom's lips curved into a brief smile when I served the roast beef. "This looks nice, Jocelyn," she said, her voice gentler than usual. For a moment, hope flickered in me. We passed dishes around the table, silverware clinking against plates, small talk drifting from the weather to Dana's latest shopping finds. Then Mom's voice shifted. As I poured her another glass, she leaned back. "So, Jocelyn, still throwing your money around at that tech job?" she asked, her words sharp, sudden. I froze, caught off guard, then forced a light laugh. "Just doing my part, Mom," I said evenly. But she didn't stop. "You act like you're better than us, always paying for everything." Her eyes narrowed, and silence fell across the table. I glanced at Dad, willing him to intervene, but he just kept cutting his meat in silence. Dana smirked into her glass. "Yeah, Jocelyn, no need to show off," she added, her laugh light but biting. Heat rose to my face, but I swallowed my response, determined not to ruin the evening. Kristen jumped in, trying to redirect. "This pie looks amazing. Did you make it from scratch?" she asked brightly. I shot her a grateful look, but Mom ignored her, turning toward Dana. "You're such a natural host. Dana, you should have done this." The pointed praise made Dana beam while I gripped my fork tighter. The criticisms kept coming. Mom called my job fancy and accused me of spending more time at work than with family. "You're always too busy, Jocelyn." "No wonder we barely see you," she said, her tone dripping with blame. I tried to explain my long hours, but she cut me off. "Dana makes time for us," she snapped. Dad kept his eyes down, silent, while Dana flicked her hair and sipped her wine, clearly enjoying her spotlight. Kristen tried again, asking Dad about his fishing trips, but Mom plowed right over her. "You think you're the big provider, don't you?" She sneered at me. "We don't need your charity." My chest tightened. I had covered rent, groceries, medical bills for years, and now it was reduced to charity. I forced a smile, though my hands shook beneath the table. Dana smirked again, sipping her wine as though this were entertainment. Kristen touched my arm, worry in her eyes, but I gave a small shake of my head. "Don't interfere." By dessert, the air was thick with tension. I served the apple pie, clinging to the hope of salvaging something, but Mom's words echoed in my head. I felt like an outsider in my own family, all my sacrifices twisted into mockery. The weight of disappointment sank cold and heavy inside me. Looking around the table, Dad avoiding my eyes, Dana basking in Mom's approval, Kristen watching me with concern. I realized this dinner wasn't binding us together. It was breaking me apart. As we sat in silence, my pie untouched, Mom locked her gaze on me. I braced myself. Then came the blow. "Jocelyn, you're not part of this family," she said, each word like a knife. Beside her, Edward nodded slowly, his face hard. "You think you can control us with your money?" he added, his voice colder than I'd ever heard. My heart stopped. The room tilted, their accusation crashing over me. I stared at them, waiting for a sign they hadn't meant it. None came. Pain burned in my chest. Years of sacrifices, covering rent, paying bills, keeping them afloat, flashed through my mind. And this was the truth they had held back. Dana leaned back smugly as though she'd seen it coming all along. Kristen froze, her fork suspended, eyes wide. I wanted to shout, demand answers, but my throat closed. Instead, I placed my fork down, hands steady despite the storm inside. "Understood," I said, my voice cool, almost detached. Nancy blinked, caught off guard, but said nothing. The weight of their words pressed down on me. They didn't see me as family, just as a wallet, a resource to drain. I thought of the $200 I'd spent on this dinner, every cent from my own pocket, poured into one last attempt at closeness. Now it felt like a cruel joke. I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud in the silence. "I'm done," I said, meeting Nancy's eyes, then Edward's. "I'm done paying for everything." Dana's smirk faltered, her wine glass pausing midair. Edward's jaw tightened, but he avoided my gaze. Nancy's face hardened, but she didn't respond. I stood, my legs trembling, but my resolve firm. I had given them years of my life, my savings, my energy. No more medical bills. No more rent. No more rescues. This dinner, this $200 spread of food and candles, would be the last thing I ever paid for them. My final act as their daughter. Kristen rose too, brushing my arm gently. "Jocelyn, let's go," she whispered, soft but urgent. I nodded, unable to look back at the family I was walking away from. As I moved toward the door, Kristen followed close, her presence steady, grounding me. I slipped on my coat, my hands shaking, not with rage, but with the raw ache splitting me open. I'd wasted my 20s trying to win their affection, convincing myself that my sacrifices might finally make me worthy. But now the truth was undeniable. I had never mattered to them. Stepping outside, the cool Savannah air brushed against my face. Kristen wrapped me in a fierce hug, holding on tight. "You don't deserve this," she said, her voice sharp with conviction. I nodded, eyes burning, though I refused to let the tears fall. Behind us, the dining room sat frozen. Nancy, Edward, and Dana stared at their half-eaten plates, the untouched pie growing cold. No one called after me. No one moved to stop me. Their silence thundered louder than words, confirming what I'd always known. I had never truly belonged to them. I shut the door, the click final, like a lock sealing shut. Kristen squeezed my hand, and together we walked to her car. I didn't glance back. Leaving wasn't just about walking out of that house. It was about walking away from years spent begging for worth. I'd been their daughter, their caretaker, their safety net, but never family. The pain cut deep, yet underneath, a spark of clarity lit up. I didn't need their validation anymore. I could chart my own path, free of their expectations. As Kristen drove us away, the glow of the house faded in the rearview mirror. I drew a long breath, their words still heavy on me. But my choice was made. A week later, the online attacks began. My phone buzzed relentlessly, every alert another sting. Nancy blasted me on Facebook, accusing me of selfishness, declaring I'd walked out on my family. Edward's post was subtler, but no less cruel, hinting at betrayal without naming me. Dana took to Twitter, her thread venomous, painting me as ungrateful and cold, claiming I had abandoned them after all they'd given me. Strangers and distant relatives piled on, branding me heartless. Sitting in my Savannah apartment, scrolling through the lies, I felt my chest tighten. Years of sacrifice, medical bills, rent, groceries, erased as though they'd never happened. I'd expected backlash after that dinner, but seeing my name dragged publicly felt like execution by humiliation. I gripped my phone, tempted to defend myself, to list every dollar I'd spent to keep them afloat. But I stopped. They weren't worth the energy. I shut Twitter, laid my phone face down, and let the silence stay. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I'd stepped out of that role, and I refused to be pulled back in. 3 weeks later, the calls started. Nancy rang first, her tone laced with urgency and irritation. "Jocelyn, Edward's medical bills are stacking up. You need to help," she demanded. Standing in my kitchen, looking out at the Savannah skyline, I replied evenly, "I'm not part of the family, remember?" My voice was calm, firm. She sputtered, ranting about my selfishness, but I hung up, pulse steady. The next night, Edward called, his voice gruff, asking for money to cover household expenses. "You said I'm not family." "That means I'm done helping," I told him, cutting through his excuses. He went silent, then hung up. Dana called last, whining, pleading for rent money. "I'm not your bank anymore, Dana," I said, sharp and final. She tried to argue, but I ended the call before she could continue. Through it all, Kristen stayed my anchor. After Nancy's call, I invited her over, needing her clarity. We sat on my couch, my laptop glowing with their latest posts. "They're trying to break you," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You've given them everything, and they're twisting it." She squeezed my hand, eyes fierce. "You're stronger than this, Jocelyn. Don't let them win." Her support kept me standing. She had seen firsthand how much I'd poured into them, and now she stood by me as I chose to stand firm. Each refusal felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. For years, I had tied my worth to their needs, believing it proved I was a good daughter. Now I saw the truth. I had been their crutch, not their family. Saying no wasn't just about the money. It was freedom. The guilt still tugged, whispering that I was letting them down. But I pushed it away. Every call I rejected, every plea I turned aside, made me lighter. I wasn't just drawing boundaries. I was building a new foundation where I came first. By the 5th week, their social media campaign lost steam. Nancy's posts drew fewer reactions. Edward's cryptic updates dwindled. Dana's threads fizzled out. Their story was collapsing, and I didn't need to prove anything. I began sleeping through the night, shoulders no longer tight. Kristen noticed, smiling when I laughed freely at dinner. "You're you again," she said, raising her glass. I smiled back, feeling years of weightlifting. For the first time, I wasn't carrying their burdens. Relief was physical, my headaches eased, my nights were calm, and I stopped dreading the sound of my phone. Their words online still floated around, but they no longer had the power to define me. I was Jocelyn Parker, a software engineer who had built her own life in Savannah. Not their ATM, not their villain. I had drawn a line, and it held. Their accusations couldn't touch me anymore. I was free to choose, and I chose myself. 6 months later, Kristen and I sat at a busy Savannah cafe, the hum of voices blending with the clatter of dishes. She mentioned she hadn't heard a word from Nancy, Edward, or Dana. No apologies, no attempts to reach out. The silence was telling, a final confirmation of the distance I had created. I nodded, unsurprised, and shifted the conversation to my work. My career became the anchor I needed, my refuge, where I could rebuild without carrying the weight of their expectations. After walking out of that dinner, I poured myself into work as a software engineer. My company offered me the chance to lead a new project, guiding a team in creating an app for small businesses in Savannah. At first, I hesitated, doubting whether I could handle the responsibility. But then I remembered NY's words. "You're not part of this family." That memory lit a fire in me. I wasn't just out to disprove them. I was determined to prove myself right. I accepted the role, throwing myself into late nights of coding and endless team meetings. With every milestone we reached, my confidence grew stronger. When the app launched successfully, it drew praise from clients and earned me a promotion to senior engineer. Kristen listened as I shared this with her, her eyes shining with pride. "You're killing it, Jocelyn," she said, leaning back in her chair. "They don't get to claim any of this?" Her words struck deep, echoing what I had been working through in therapy with Dr. Ellen Gray. I had started seeing her 2 months after that dinner, weighed down by guilt from cutting ties. In our sessions, she helped me reshape my perspective. "You're not abandoning them," Ellen said gently, yet firmly. "You're choosing to invest in yourself." That guidance, paired with Kristen's fierce loyalty, gave me permission to put myself first. My days became purposeful. I mentored junior developers, helping them tackle complex code and watching their confidence blossom. I pitched ideas directly to our CEO, suggesting features that could improve user experience. One of my proposals, a customer data tool for small businesses, was adopted as a company priority, and I led the team that brought it to life. The work was challenging. Deadlines pressed in, bugs tested my patience. But every obstacle felt less like a weight and more like an opportunity to grow. I was no longer the daughter expected to bankroll everything. I was a leader building something real. The absence of Nancy, Edward, and Dana was sharp. No calls, no texts, not even a half-hearted apology. Their silence said everything. They had meant it when they told me I wasn't family. That truth stung at first, but eventually it fueled me. I didn't need their approval to thrive. My office, filled with glowing monitors and sticky notes, became my new home. My colleagues respected me not for what I could provide, but for what I could accomplish. Ellen reminded me of that during one session when I told her about my promotion. "You've built this, Jocelyn," she said warmly. "Your worth has nothing to do with them." Her words stayed with me. Kristen echoed the same sentiment over coffee one morning, her tone fierce. "You're not just surviving, you're shining," she said. Lifting her cup in a toast, their support became my lifeline. Proof that I'd found a new kind of family, one that valued me for who I was. My career became a canvas for my ambitions. I enrolled in an advanced machine learning course, spending weekends immersed in algorithms. I spoke at a local tech conference, my voice steady as I shared the impact of our app. When the audience applauded, it felt like a validation I'd never received from Nancy or Edward. I was no longer the invisible daughter chasing scraps of approval. I was Jocelyn Parker, carving out a legacy in Savannah's tech community. The silence from my family solidified my resolve. They hadn't reached out, not even to pretend at remorse. Their silence was their choice. Just as my career was mine, for years I had been tethered to their needs. Now, I was free to chase my own goals. Walking out of the cafe with Kristen one evening, I carried a quiet strength. My life was no longer about proving my worth to them. It was about proving it to myself. My career was my evidence, each success pulling me further from their shadow. A year later, I heard about their struggles. Kristen told me during a quiet dinner at my Savannah apartment, relaying what she'd heard from old acquaintances. Nancy and Edward had lost their home, unable to keep up with mortgage payments once I stopped covering their bills. They'd moved into a modest rental at the city's edge, a far cry from the comfort they once flaunted. Dana, who had lived off my money to fund her extravagant lifestyle, was now working long hours in retail, stocking shelves and ringing up customers. She had downsized into a cheaper apartment, her life stripped of luxury. The news stirred complicated emotions. I pictured Nancy sorting through her belongings, pride bruised. Edward, once so loud, now quiet in defeat. Dana, who had always expected me to rescue her, was finally learning what independence felt like. I didn't celebrate their fall. There was no victory in watching them struggle, but their hardships revealed the truth. I had been the one propping up their lives. Without me, their choices finally caught up to them. Kristen set down her fork and looked at me firmly. You gave them everything, Jocelyn. They threw it away. This is on them. Her words steadied me, reminding me I wasn't responsible for their collapse. Reflecting on that dinner a year earlier, I realized how their words, "You're not part of this family," had flipped my world upside down. For years, I had poured myself into meeting their demands, believing it proved my worth. Their rejection forced me to confront that lie. I hadn't walked away out of malice. I walked away to reclaim my life. Kristen had been there through it all, her loyalty a sharp contrast to the family who had discarded me. Over coffee one evening, she told me, "You're stronger than they'll ever know." Her faith in me became a mirror, reflecting the resilience I had built. The lesson was clear, born out of the pain of that night. Family isn't just blood. Family is the people who value you, who respect your boundaries. For too long, I let Nancy, Edward, and Dana define my worth through what I could provide. Cutting them off taught me to see my value beyond their demands. It wasn't easy. Guilt crept in sometimes, whispering that I had abandoned them. But each milestone, each day I chose myself, silenced those doubts. I had built a life surrounded by people like Kristen, who saw me for me, not what I could give. Their consequences were the result of their own actions. Nancy and Edward's dependence on me had hidden their reckless spending. Without me, reality hit hard. Dana's entitlement had shielded her from responsibility, and now she was facing the outcome of her choices. They had expected me to return, to keep carrying their burdens. But I didn't. Their struggles weren't my failure. They were the result of their refusal to see me as anything more than a resource. I learned to let go, to let them live with the lives they had chosen. And to those of you who've stayed with me through this story, thank you. This journey was never just about one dinner. It was about finding my strength, setting boundaries, and choosing myself. If this speaks to you, I invite you to reflect on your own life. Where do you need to draw the line? Your worth isn't measured by what you give others. It's defined by who you are. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences below. And if my story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more. Your support means the world. That evening, I stood on my balcony, the Savannah skyline stretched before me. I was no longer the daughter they had cast aside. I was Jocelyn Parker, whole, free, and living a life built on my own terms. Their struggles belonged to them. My peace belonged to me.